there's a difference in what my audience wants to buy and what I still want to wear.
It's because you're getting old, Matt Vincent. You're getting old.
Now we have sound clapping. Everything's synced up. Good to go. Yeah, it's weird. Like, I want more, like, minimally branded stuff now.
Yeah.
Just, I'm old.
You're a man now, Matt Vincent.
It's like,
You're a man.
Just give me a tiny brand. Yet that's not what the majority of the people spending money on something want. Show it off. I get it. You know. So it's been good to get to do both. I had one of those, and I don't remember what company it was, would send me stuff, and like the first box they sent me, they're like, this is exactly for you, and it was like really expensive.
Like fancy
designer
clothes?
shirts, like long sleeve shirts. I'm like, I don't have a job.
Yeah, you're like, well, when would I wear this? When would I wear this?
I think I ended up keeping all of it anyway, though, just because I was lazy and didn't send it back.
That's
I just
fun.
kept it all and then shut down my membership.
Well, like every so often you have to go to like a real meeting with real people in a conference room. Do you ever have to do that? Is there ever occasion in your current Matt Vincent life iteration where you would have to do that?
The closest it would come is like doing work for Good Life Fitness.
Oh yeah.
That I would need to meet with and talk to people that
that are like
to look
that are like
presentable.
corporate.
Yeah, corporate-ish.
Yeah. Although I mean, I have to think with you, your whole thing is branded apparel, and presumably if you're having a business meeting, that's also what you're talking about. So in your case, it would be appropriate always to be wearing your own branded apparel.
I just started making some like polo shirts, so that's it's easy.
Yeah.
You know, easy enough.
Yeah.
How weird has this all been for you guys? Because the people that I've had on and we've talked about COVID coming into this, I think you're the only people I know that I'm friends with that still own a brick and mortar.
I know.
So, I mean, I know people with gyms, but they're private gyms.
Right.
You know, like you don't care about the new space you guys are building out. Like, that's not for people to pay money and train at to keep open.
Yeah, that's not for members. Yeah, that's just, it's basically like our playground and office. Yeah, so, you know, it's been a really weird time, and I actually just was on the phone with a friend of mine talking to her about sort of what the future of brick and mortar business is like. I mean, I will say it's been a really stressful time because, and especially for someone with my personality type, which is, as you know, controlling.
A bit.
A little controlling.
A bit. I wouldn't say controlling. I'd say more alpha.
Yeah, but alpha, and I'm also a total planner. Like, I like to plan. I'm like, okay, from this time to this time, I'm going to do this. And, you know, that's sort of how my brain naturally works, is that I sort of live in planning mode.
Sure.
And so when you're in a situation like this where all planning, you know, all bets are off, there's no planning you can do. And no one has any answers. I mean, you know, Kelly and I have even managed to, like, finagle connections. You know, we've actually met and gotten to know a little bit this UCSF physician who's on Gavin Newsom's COVID task force. So, I mean, she's like in the press conferences, she is at the tip of the spear in terms of like learning the data and the information and everything. And even she says, you know, we don't know. I mean, there's just certain businesses, and, you know, right when they think they're going to open businesses like ours, then they'll be in some other state, a gigantic outbreak, and then that scares them off. And, you know, I feel really mixed about it. I have an intellectual challenge on the one hand. You know, there's a lot of gyms that have organized, and they feel that it's super unfair that they're not allowed to be open. And they've organized, and, you know, in some states there are lawsuits, and in San Francisco there's a group that, you know, I support that are organizing to try to petition the mayor to open. I do think the problem is that, you know, all gyms are not created equal, right? Like a CrossFit gym and a 24-hour fitness are very different in terms of how we can use the space. So I do think it has sucked that we've all been lumped together.
Sure.
Although I get it also from a policy standpoint. It's like, you know, they can't be making, you know, they just have to.
You can't do it on an individual basis.
Right,
That's not how government works.
No, that's not how government works. So on the other hand, though, you know, I have been, I guess, maybe less on the unfairness bandwagon, mostly because, you know, I want my kids' school to open, and I want, you know, I don't know. I guess I feel like, look, if my gym has to be closed so that we can move beyond this pandemic faster, and things like my kids' schools can open, like, fine. Like, gyms should be closed.
But with that said, also, you guys have been, I don't know, fortunate or smart enough or whatever the word is, but you have other income outside the gym business that you guys have established an online presence that you can work remotely.
And I think you're exactly right. In fact, that's probably 100% of the reason, right? If my sole personal income was attached to owning a gym.
Yeah, like if you guys haven't had income in the last
No, I
5
would be
months.
completely panicked and, like standing on London Breed. She's the mayor of San Francisco. Like I'd be standing on her doorstep and, pleading for her to let us open. So I think you're right. I mean, I do think the fact that we have another income source makes a huge difference in terms of our decision making. And I will say, all that said, it still really
sucks.
And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the brick and mortar fitness business, because as you know, and we've known each other for a long time now, but I mean, I think really starting with like the advent of CrossFit in the early 2000s, the boutique fitness thing has just blown up. I mean, on every corner.
Yeah, we're going to see that kind of boom that I think happened with early CrossFit, with people building these home garage gyms and different stuff like that. We're going to see that now move into
right. So is
powerlifting's already been that way, and it's going to just go further.
Right, and CrossFit had sort of that. There was an element of CrossFit people who always had kind of a home gym and focused on that. So it's going to be really interesting because I mean, on every street corner there's a Core Power Yoga and a Soul Cycle and an Orange Theory, and I mean basically there are a billion of these little mini fitness chains everywhere, and so it's going to be super interesting for me, I think, to see like, does that survive? Will people really miss going and training with others enough? Will the community aspect be enough that it will draw people back into gyms? Because I've got to think people have figured out ways to train, especially people who like training.
I think what will end up happening, right, is I think we'll see this shift back to micro gyms.
Yep.
And it'll be 5 or 6 people on a block decide, like, yo, we can train at my buddy's house. The garage is big enough. Why don't we invest $5,000 total, and then we're set up on equipment, and they can't ever tell us we can't train.
Right. I mean,
tough.
we've even had, we've had some interesting things in California too, because of all the fires. Last fall they started turning all the power off. That was literally the only thing PG&E could do to avoid burning down our entire state was just literally turning the power off for the whole state. So that was last year.
How is that a solution?
I know, it's really, literally,
Jesus
you're like,
Christ.
wow, isn't it 2020? You're
Just
like, it's
rolling
crazy.
brownouts is the best plan.
So there was a point last fall, in the fall of 2019, where the power, I think, was out for like 5 days in the entire Bay Area, and fortunately
5 days in the whole, like, San Francisco has no power for 5 days.
No power. None. That's why we have that funny fridge in the garage. So his like power outage freak out purchase was this garage. We got a garage fridge which plugs into the wall, functions just fine, but you can actually attach it to a propane tank.
Right.
So that was like our sort of fire. But anyway, already there was that impact on brick and mortar businesses last year. Unfortunately, we're in San Francisco. We don't really need it. Things like air conditioning, it's cool.
Enough.
We have those big garage doors that can open, so we can basically function. But, we even then had to alter our schedule a little bit because we have some classes at 5 o'clock. There were a couple times of the day where it was dark. It actually was too dark with all the lights off in the gym. And so anyway, we've had some other challenges, and I know those, all other, fitness businesses have faced those challenges. Obviously, the COVID pandemic being the mother of all challenges.
Yeah, right now it's a real unique time, man.
I think it could mean a real drawback in just the sheer number and amount of fitness facilities. I mean, what I find interesting about San Francisco CrossFit, which you can relate to because you've been there, that for years it honestly has been less about fitness and more about community.
That's the thing that HQ, I feel like, never quite understood the magic that they've created.
No.
Was that they still thought that they were driving a boat, that the boat was more than happy without any leadership.
Right.
That it's the community that you built that's the magic of this, man. Like, in fact, you built something that's so good, despite poor management and what ends up coming with HQ because of the shit that's gone down with Greg.
Right.
CrossFit is going to be fine as far as a methodology.
Right, and I would have to make one small correction on what you said, and that is that I don't think it was ever. I think HQ was sort of successful despite itself. I think it was because of all these little gyms who created their own little special, unique cultures, but most of them focused, of course, in part on exercise because that's the core of the business, but a lot on community. And all these little gyms all over the country created these communities, and that's what kept people coming back. And I think that's really what is so special about San Francisco CrossFit, and why Kelly and I have still owned a gym all these years, right? Because again, as we talked about before, it hasn't been our primary income stream.
I mean, even shit like that. Like, how many members have you guys get married?
Tons.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if I just even go to my Facebook feed, like on the weekends, I mean, this was pre-COVID, but, you know, the people I'd see out socializing, it was always these groups of gym people, and, you know, other people have, you know, spun off and started their own gyms. And, you know, it's definitely been sort of like a third place for so many people. So I think that's the other thing that's unknown. I mean, one thing that does make me sad, you know, we're allowed to have these little 8-person outdoor classes now. And obviously full of precautions. There's like tons of sanitizing and everybody's wearing a mask.
Right.
And so I worry a little bit that all the COVID precautions we have to take are also going to sort of not ruin, but negatively impact the community feel. Because one of the things, again, that's so lovely about San Francisco CrossFit is, you know, there's so much like, you know, positive regard, interaction, people hug, they high five, they encourage each other.
Dude, you can't sterile environment a gym like that.
Yeah, and you know, the coaches get right up on you and give you coaching on technique and mechanics, and you know, it really, I think there's all those kinds of things that are never even said, but that help create that environment. And so I do worry that you know, our members are going to start to come back and feel like they're in this sterile masked environment that it's hard for us. So I mean, those are my worries. I worry about the brick and mortar fitness.
This isn't going to be
overall.
a switch that gets turned off.
No. I mean, man, you know, people are talking about, you know, gyms may not really meaningfully be able to reopen for like a year.
Right.
So, you know, we're all kind of riding right now on, you know, we all got some government support. Hopefully people had a little bit of cash reserve or something that, you know, everyone's kind of riding on well, mostly government support right now. But, you know, that's going to start to peter out, and it doesn't look like there doesn't look like more's coming down the pipeline to support small businesses.
Well, it's easier to support things like Home Depot.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that's really interesting is, you know, all these people have been getting this expanded unemployment, which is, it's going to be super interesting as a business owner, both for the gym and for the Ready State, to see how the loss of that actually affects our businesses, because presumably people have been making, you know, a decent wage on unemployment over the last, you know, 5 months,
right,
and have been able to maintain things like, you know, buying a HVIII brand goods pair of shorts that they like but don't need, or keeping a Ready State membership, or keeping a gym membership even though they only have outdoor classes, right? Like, there's been some kind of, like, I would say luxury expenses that people have been able to maintain because they've been on unemployment, and now that expanded unemployment's gone and people are back to sort of real minimal unemployment. So it's going to be super interesting. I mean, the next few months are going to be very interesting from a bit, you know, because I think, you know, we've seen the opposite. The Ready State is up, you know, 40% this year. And I think that's partly because we were well positioned as a COVID business, right? Like, we aren't the business that just said on March 15th, oh shit, we better create a fitness app. You know, this is what we've been doing. Yeah. Right. So we are obviously well positioned, but anyway, so man, there's just so many unknowns. There's the fitness business is unknown. I think now that we're going into this new wave of, you know, I think now is, you know, I think we've all been talking about and scared about the economy, but nothing bad has actually happened because everyone's been propped up by all this government support up till now. But now they're not. Businesses, you know, the PPP's gone, unemployment's gone. It's going to be super interesting to see what happens.
I'm also, you know, not even just the gym business, right? Like, I'm very curious to see how big of a shift this creates culturally within remote employment. Because, I mean, if I own a giant building, an office space full of people, and I'm like, wait a minute, now I don't have to pay whatever the rent is on this 10-story building.
Yeah.
And janitorial staff.
Right.
And everything else.
Right,
like,
insurance. And
I mean, that was something I was asking a buddy of mine, Zach, who's got a regular job like that. I'm like, yo, what would you take as less salary to never have to go to the office?
Yeah.
And he's like 10% for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I'd agree with that across the board.
Yeah. You know, here's what's interesting, though. I have a couple thoughts on that. Well, I will add that we've got a friend who lives just down the street, four doors down, and she works at Google, and Google's like, don't come back till July 2021.
Whoa.
I mean, they've already said that. Like, that's done. Like, it's July 2020. Like, they basically said.
But that's a very proactive plan to be like, if we get to come back, this is great. But at least now we're going to go ahead and set our standard and make our business plan so that we're at the wheel and not reactionary, waiting for what we're told we can and can't do.
Yeah. So I have a couple thoughts on that from like an employer. And granted, I appreciate that like my perspective is entirely like I've been an employer now for 15 years and I have not been an employee. So that's my bias. But, you know, I'm not sure that I think full-time working from home is actually good.
Okay.
And I actually really am a believer that seeing people and interacting with them face to face, both from a business standpoint, from a creative standpoint. I think there's a lot lost by people working from home and not physically being together. And I think companies are going to start to see and feel that. I think the other thing is, it's one thing to take a company culture that already existed because you did have an in-house culture and then switch it to being on Zoom like we've all done. I think it's a whole other thing to create a company culture that way, or like create new, like it's one thing if you're a seasoned Google employee and told, dude, work at home for a year, like good, you know how to do your job, you know how everything works, you know systems. Imagine if you're new, you just get hired. Like I think back to when I was hired as a first year lawyer, like that is not a job that you can, right?
There's jobs that can't go this route. Right. 100%, right?
But the other thing I think on it that I've been thinking about starting a side business, but you know how there's all those personality tests you can take online, like the Myers-Briggs, and now there's like a billion others. Well, I think it would be cool, and you know, maybe this is too big brotherish for people, but I think it's a good idea. And that is to create some kind of, and I certainly don't have the expertise because you'd need like a psychologist.
You're an idea guy. I get it.
Yeah. But I think it would be cool to create some kind of personality test to sort of ferret out who can and can't work from home. Because I think that's a big thing from an employer standpoint. Like I bet of the, let's say, you know, 30 some odd people that I have working for me, either as employees or contractors or whatever, that 50% of them are not good at working at home.
Well, but I also don't think that that's fair, right? Because I think it takes a long time to get your sea legs under you and figure out how to manage working from home. Like now, I've done my own thing since March of 17 with Hate Brand or whatever else it is I do. But prior to that, like I was doing outside sales and I did work remote. So I mean, I've spent the last 14 years working remote.
Yeah.
You know, worked for a company, did outside sales, so I booked everything myself, and then I traveled. Now, it took a long time to get to where I felt responsible enough to myself to handle that responsibility.
Right.
I guess, right? That like I get up at 6, I still do my job. The beauty of what I liked about working from home and the big advantage of it for me is I wasn't ever riding the clock. Right. And I wasn't ever this feeling of like, I don't have to do busy work.
Right. But here's what I'd say, Matt. I think it's great for employees. I am not sure it is great for employers, because I do think
if people aren't producing,
but I think there's going to be,
rid of it.
I think there's certain personality types, like certain people are super easily distracted, or they have ADHD, or they have whatever it is. You know, I don't want to lump people together. There's certain personality types who I think have the focus, attention, and drive to actually work full time from home and actually do. And then I think there's a shit ton of people who, if they're fucking lucky, excuse my language, maybe work 6 hours a day. And like if I'm paying you to work 40 hours a week and you're working 6 hours a day, and yeah, of course, maybe you're getting those, there's going to be a lot of people who just do the minimum to keep the job alive, right? And you don't want people who do, well, yes, of course, that's going to be in any, right? They're just going to do the minimum and they're not going to do, I know that could also happen in person.
That happens in person. People dick off constantly.
People dick off constantly, and they're, you know, chatting away, and they're on the internet, and they're fucking off at work as well. And, you know, so I know it's, but I'm just saying that I think there are a variety of reasons. There are a variety of reasons why the work from home culture may not work in the long term. I think employers may rebel and say, dude, people need to be in the office, both from a productivity standpoint and from a creativity standpoint. And that, you know,
and accountability. I think that's part of it too. But I mean, I guess the way I've always felt about things, and especially with how I was hired and the way my job was, I'm not a dude who needs to be micromanaged.
Right.
And if you're going to, I'll find somewhere else to work.
Yeah, but some people do need that. There are people who need that. Yeah.
And these people don't get the responsibility, or you don't get the benefit of what working from home is.
Right. I mean,
so that's fine.
Right.
We still have both.
So that's why I want to make the test, Matt, so that as an employer, you can figure out who can and can't manage it. And
is it just like eye tracking of like your laptop here and something on a TV? And it's like,
I
noticed you looked at the TV 30 times this minute.
I realize that there are a lot of problems, and that there's probably even legal reasons why you couldn't make people come to work because they took some tests. I mean, I realize the total, like, it's a preposterous idea.
But the generality of it, I get it. I get the idea of like, are you introvert or extrovert? Do we, you know, what time do you wake up in the morning?
Right. What are your work habits like?
Do you use an alarm clock?
Right. Like,
if you it's probably going to be great at home for you.
Yeah. So anyway, I think, you I will also say, though, I feel I have 1,000 feelings on it. I don't just feel one way. I mean, I will say, too, though, as, I've worked my entire life, including when I had my kids. I mean, I took really short maternity leaves and kept working. And I will say that I probably could have used a bit more flexibility. Now, my law firm did give me some flexibility when I was a new mom, but still not quite enough. So I think, here's what I think. My feeling is that a hybrid approach is going to be what works best for everybody.
So maybe like 3 days at home and 2 days.
Something, or the other way around.
Which I think's cool too, because then you can set up offices. That you still don't need as much space, right? So let's say that our creative team's going to come in and meet 2 days a week.
Right.
They have a conference room they can meet in. They don't all need cubicles. They don't need to.
You could bring people in waves, right? You could have way smaller space, and you got to come in this more shared, more like kind of shared workspace type stuff. And I think there's a lot. So I think here's what I think. I think what's great about this is I think it's causing everybody to rethink a lot of things. And I think there's so much that has sucked about this whole pandemic, but I also think, I think people are going to rethink travel. I mean, the amount of travel people do from a work standpoint that probably could have just been done on a Zoom call is a ton. And so
that was my whole job.
Yeah.
The outside sales thing. There were plenty of days for me that I spent 11 hours in the car to go have a 20-minute meeting with people.
Right.
But that face-to-face time is part of what makes building relationships.
Right.
And as a guy who did sales for so long and gets that side of it, that the building relationships, you got to show up.
Got to show up.
And and I've always known, even with you guys, right? We've known each other now for 6 or 7 years, and there's a period of time with building relationships that you feel like, but when do they come to visit me?
Yeah.
And I'm aware of the difference in what our lives are demanding.
Right.
You guys have kids and other things going on.
Right.
I'm free to travel.
Right.
And if it's important to me to see you guys because I need it,
right,
I just go.
Right.
And so
it
was the same thing with customers of I'll just go hang out.
Right. It's worth it. It's worth it. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, to me, I think, travel is going to be rethought. How people work out and train is going to be rethought. I think how we work will be rethought. I'm hoping that the end result of that is some kind of hybrid model. Now, also, my biggest fear as an employer is everyone's going to be like, great, everyone's working home Monday and Friday. So there's just everyone gets a 4-day weekend every weekend.
Right.
I'm no, that's not happening. Like if you're working from home 2 days a week, it's going to be like a Tuesday and a Thursday.
Yeah,
and they're not going to be connected days. And there's going to have to be some way to
that throws
but
me
it's
to my
all
next.
really interesting. This is a really interesting time.
What do you think about the change to the 4-day work week like we've seen in other countries?
Those are all socialist countries.
They are all socialist countries. That's not incorrect.
And I mean, how I'm basically a socialist at heart, Matt, and I believe in universal health care. And
should.
I think, and I mean, honestly, after COVID, seriously, anyone who isn't is crazy because, I mean, the amount of people who are anti-socialist and then happily accepted fucking expanded unemployment and PPP are all of them,
well, let me
which
get this
is
right.
socialism, by the way.
My government, out of nowhere, can decide that we have a couple $1 trillion that we're just going to print.
Right.
You're telling me we can't afford health care for everyone?
Well, that's the thing. So,
this is
I don't know.
We're making up fake money anyway.
I think if we had a social safety net, and I'm sorry for getting political on your podcast,
all right.
but I really believe if we had a social safety net in the form of universal health care and real unemployment for people who actually are really unemployed, not scammers, because there is a problem with that. There's a lot of scammers. I think if we had things like free college and if we had a social safety net in this country.
Well, but if we do that, that means college has to stop being a business.
Right.
Because that's what university system is in this country.
Right. And I think that's also going to have to be rethought because right now they're like, oh shit, nobody's going back to school and this business is failing.
Also,
and
your fucking degrees aren't worth what you're pretending to tell us they are.
Right.
I mean, unless you're planning on going into law school or medical profession or something that needs this level of education.
Right. Well, I disagree, though, Matt, because I think part of our big problem in our culture right now is lack of education. And
I think lack of education is part of the problem, but I don't believe our university system is built on education.
Well, I think it depends. But I actually am a believer in a just straight up liberal. I think if you learn to read and think and read books and read literature and learn about politics and learn some science and all that is, even if it's given to you at a corporate university, is an ultimate good because you're going to be a better citizen and you're actually going to think an intelligent thought and all those things.
I agree with this completely.
Yeah.
And with the university system, one of the things that I believe that was supposed to take place in this environment were challenging ideas and force people to think with different ideas coming at them. Right? But we've also started getting rid of that with safe space movement and hiring a completely liberal staff that also mimics the same view that the students have. So there isn't a challenge.
No, there's a lot. There's problems. I acknowledge there are massive problems in education.
And then you have kids graduate with $200,000 in debt.
Well, that's a big problem. Again, social safety net.
Yeah, without a fucking degree,
so
they
I'm
can get a
basically
job.
like, look, like we would really have to change our, profit first mindset as a country that like it's all about capitalism, because I'm sorry, a 4-day work week means we're all going to make a little less money and our profit margins are going to be a little less big and people are going to get a little less rich, and like there's going to be a downstream consequence. But the Europeans, and especially in socialist countries, are willing to say, look, like we're actually we're willing to pay our executives less, and there's some things that people are willing to do and sacrifice in terms of gains and profit that like we're not willing to do as a culture. Like we're all about make the most money possible, create as many billionaires as we can, make, grow. Everything needs to be exponential.
Capitalist.
Yeah, I mean mass. So I don't think we can do a 4-day work week.
Are you cooking in the sun? Do you want to move a little bit?
I'm so hot.
Brant. Hey, Brant. Hey, Brant.
We're dying. Here, what about should we move ourselves?
Yeah, we'll just
watch
move
this.
ourselves
I can
a
just
little
watch
bit.
this. Watch this. I can move in.
Perfect. Just pull it in.
I don't know if we're still going to be on camera anymore.
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if we're ready for that, Matt, but I think, man.
It's
there's
an
a
odd
lot.
time.
It's a really weird time.
It's a really, really
I also
weird
get
time.
to, even though I, like I have socialist tendencies, I am also an employer, and,
well, you're also a capitalist.
I'm a capitalist.
You
and
believe
I'm
being paid well for the hard work
I'm
that
benefiting.
you do?
I'm benefiting from our capitalist system. I mean, man, in every way, like I'm so privileged. It's definitely not working for everybody, though. It's not working for a lot of people.
Nope.
There's too much inequity and too much unfairness, and
The weird
too many
one-
billionaires and poor people. And
The weird one is a lot of the people who looked at, hell, your move away from law to help run a website,
right,
as a fucking crazy idea.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Or that I have a job that I can't explain to my previous generation.
Right.
Of what you do what? How does that equal money?
Yeah, you're like, what? What is that? Yeah,
Right?
No, it's a weird time.
Except for now, all of this weirdness that we do for a living seem to be a little recession-proof.
Yep.
Because we can hit a global audience from a very small place.
Yep.
And I don't need a big percentage of people globally to like my shit.
Right.
For this to do well.
Right. You could do right. Exactly.
It's literally no one on earth needs to buy my stuff, and it's enough.
You need a core
people.
crew. That's all you need is a core crew. Yeah.
And I think we're going to see some creative changes. I hope we see creative changes.
Me too. I mean, I do. I have the same fear as you. Like, I really hope we learn and change. Because this, I mean,
that doesn't sound very
history,
American, if
I
I'm
know. I
gonna be
mean,
honest
well,
with you.
I will say though, if you look back at history, which not enough Americans do, there were a lot of changes actually after the big things that happened. I mean, there were changes in our culture after World War II and after the Great Depression. I mean, any of the big, nationwide events that have affected everybody have resulted in some kinds of change. So I'm hoping that we don't like buck that historical trend and that we actually do make some changes. I mean, maybe it won't be like as universal in every, maybe we'll all just go back to traveling as much, or we'll go back to our gyms, or who knows what we'll do. But I am hoping some things, I think people will rethink things. I mean, I do think the work thing is a big one that I'm actually confident will be rethought. I don't think all employers are going to say work from home forever. I think it will be a hybrid model, but just running as an experiment and having a lot of companies see that for the most part it's worked, I can't see that that's not going to change.
Yeah, like I said, I still think that there's some jobs and some people that are going to have to do the other route. But I hope that it does provide more freedom for those who can handle that responsibility, that they get to live this life.
Yep, I agree.
Because it's good.
I agree. And I think, too, like, obviously I'm really focused on, like, women and the fact that there's so many inequities still for women in this world. Even for someone like me who has every privilege that there could be, minus being a man.
Man, I honestly don't know how I feel about a lot of inequities between male and female employment. And I'm aware of, I believe the system has not been set up very well for women to succeed.
Yeah.
And then I'm also equally frustrated by stuff like I don't know any men who have used getting married as a way to increase their place in the world. Like as it's a salary position. like finding someone that's going to take care of you.
Right, but I don't know. Maybe that's because you're from the South, but I don't know any women in that position. Not one. Not one.
See, that's I'm very aware that I knew women who were trying to. This was the goal of getting married.
No. Like, that is some weird, like, that's some Southern thing.
Yeah, I know this isn't you.
No, not me, but I mean, not only...
You can't say it's a Southern thing. I mean, I think we invented the gold-digging housewife probably came from California.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, man, I have a ton of, like, I have not a most of my, like, female friends, like, out her and their husbands, and... I don't know. I don't know any women in that position.
You're in definitely a situation that you guys are all driving forward and really trying to move the needle.
Yeah.
But I don't, I do think that is a weird one of, I mean, I don't know if it's a learned helplessness that a lot of women have come through.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't even speak to that because I literally, all of my female friends are total badasses and not a one of all of them would make a choice like that.
Right. And this is one of those reasons I really wanted to talk to you, and same reason I enjoyed having Rebecca on the podcast. Like, these are women doing it.
Yeah.
Like, and you, like, managing businesses and doing all this other type of stuff. Like, yeah, of course, none of this surprises me. You saying that, like, well, I'm a bit of a planner. I'm like, yeah, no shit. I'm aware of when I talk to Space Cadet Kelly about something
I know.
I need to run this by whoever actually manages the books.
I know, like the rafting trip. I was like so bugged by him. By the way, that's a side thing. I was like, dude.
Look, don't think I didn't harass back. All my harassment was like, what you texted me? What else you want to get me excited about? And then like have Juliet tell me I can't come. Like, would be great.
I know. I was like, you got to make me the bad guy. What the hell? I don't want to be the bad guy. I love Matt Vincent.
I'm Kelly. I'm the dreamer.
I'm like, I want to hang out with Matt Vincent. What the hell? Anyway, yeah. So good. Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say. Here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I can't speak to what you're talking about. What I know is a bunch of fucking badass, highly educated women. Like, let me talk to you about the college thing. Like, this is a pet peeve of mine.
Well, and you've got
There's
two
all
girls
these,
that are going to
There are all these men who say, oh, well, I mean, do you even need to go to college? And, like, whatever, Mark Zuckerberg didn't even finish college and he started Facebook. And I'm going to...
LeBron James, Julia.
Maybe I'm going to just give my kid their college fund and let him go be an entrepreneur and all this stuff. And literally, I want to vomit on the inside and then actually punch those people in the face. Because here's the deal. So something like, let's just talk venture capital.
Okay.
So there are only, I think that, I may have the numbers a little off, but not super off. Something like only 7% of companies that get venture capital are women-owned.
Wow.
And
what's the
let me tell you this.
What's the percentage of businesses owned by women in general?
Still probably smaller, but not 7%. No, it's not. Bigger. There's more. There's more. And then if you're talking about a male-female duo like Kelly and I, it's a little higher, like 10%, but it's still disconnected from how many women own businesses or men and women together. And let me ask you what I think is a rhetorical question.
All right.
How many of the women in that 7% that are getting venture capital don't both have a college degree and likely an MBA from Stanford and or Harvard?
Oh, I would say most.
0%.
Zero have.
They all have an exceptional educational pedigree to a T, and they wouldn't even be invited into the room to pitch their company or job without having those credentials on their resume.
Does the same apply to men? In the space?
No. You could literally be like a kid who graduated from high school and had a good idea, and you put it together, and you're both invited into the room and taken seriously, even without any of those credentials.
Just because you're male.
Just because you're male. And even better if you're white male.
Well,
I mean, that's just one, though, of 1,000 examples like that.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. That's a really tricky one.
Really, when people say, oh, well, we don't even need college anymore. College is a dead system. I'm like, well, maybe for your son.
maybe your white dudes
son,
don't need.
Yeah, like maybe for your white male son, maybe your white male son can skip college and go start a business and get venture capital and be super successful. But I can tell you what, my daughters who still, compared to most people on earth, have a gigantic amount of privilege, they can't skip that step.
No.
They can't do it. We're not ready as a culture for that.
No, we're not.
So, look at this. Like boards, company boards.
Yeah.
There's no women on any of them. So it's so bad that the state of California actually had to pass a law saying that by 2020 this year, all public company boards have to have at least one woman. And literally it had to be structural, because with leaving boards to their own avail, right? Because here's what happens. You're on a board, you, Matt Vincent, you're on the Home Depot board, and then you're getting old and you're like, shoot, now my lawyer son, I'm going to invite him to be on the board because I'm about to age out. And so there's tons of nepotism. There's a bro fest. There's like, let's go golfing and invite this guy to, right? Like there's a lot, right? And so then you think of the downstream consequences of that. Forget about the symbolic nature of there being no women on boards. If you're someone who values diversity of thought and opinion and values seeing things in the world differently, and you also think that having different voices and different opinions and thoughts in a company will make your company better, like it's a gigantic hole, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, we're just talking like that's just 2 of 1,000 examples like that. So yes, I guess I go back to what you said. I'm sure there are some women in some cultures who are gold diggers and trying to meet their husband to create some kind of social status. But I think those people are the exception, not the norm.
I do think it's an exception. I do believe that too. I think it's as equally an exception as the women that are like you.
Right. Right.
Which I don't consider you normal. If you were normal, we wouldn't be having a conversation.
No, I know. Yes.
So, yeah, it's
complicated.
Man. I guess it's, the big question here is how do we fix the people in the bell curve, which is where we would always like the needle to move. I mean, the people who are doing and charging and making decisions, we're going to continue anyway.
Right.
Well,
I think it goes back to this education thing, and I mean, you and I maybe don't see totally eye to eye on it, but I think social media has fucked it up too.
Well, I agree with that too. Yeah. I also believe that with that education, I wish that there was. And my point isn't those who want to go into nursing school or doctor or law degree or any of these other type of stuff, but like, man, we can't spend $250,000 on a philosophy
degree. No, I get that,
degree,
right? Like if it throws people into, so we have to sort that out, because I think we need to say, look, we like I actually think there is value in a philosophy degree just in and of itself.
I do too,
but not to the
I think there should be some minimal courses that need to be taken with anything,
right.
To challenge thinking. But I also think there should also at the same time be some vocational training for everyone as well.
Well, we've really messed that up, right? Again, going back to the European countries, they've done a way better job of it. I mean, maybe there's some argument that they do too early tracking. They do all these heavy high school testing things, and then they basically track kids. They're like, you can be a college kid and you're going to go into vocations. But the only vocation that we have as a country right now is the military. Right. Which is super. I mean, if you basically aren't on a college track, it seems like, I think for a lot of kids feel like the only alternative is to go in, unless your dad happens to be in the trades, maybe you can sort of see a path towards that. But
that you could think about apprenticing and going
apprenticing,
into
that, but that's still like, I again think that's the exception, not the rule. And so then it's like, well, wow, your only choice is to go in the military, and
I
that's
think
not
it's
for a
still
lot
looked
of people.
down upon. I still think that an idea of a high school kid graduating who, let's say, making good grades, decides like, I'd like to weld or be a plumber.
Right.
Which is looked down upon. Like, why would you do that? These people will work for fucking ever.
Right. And also make great money and be able to control their own schedule and be their own boss. And there's so many great things about it. And again, it is. So I think there's something to say that it's like, we actually have done a disservice to a lot of kids. I still just think the education thing, I mean, here's going to be something I'm going to say that's real controversial. You may not like it.
All right.
But and I think I've talked to you about this before, so it'll come as no surprise. But I think one of our gigantic flaws we have as a country right now is the death of appreciation of expertise. And that's because of social media. Everyone thinks that their opinion is deserved of equal weight. So, like, here's what I would say to you. And this may sound obnoxious, but, like, I believe that my opinion on politics is deserving of greater weight than your opinion, because I have spent 3 years and then followed by 8 years of studying and practicing law.
So
I don't think our opinions are equal,
no.
right? But most people don't think that. Most people would engage with me online thinking that their either no college, lack of college, or any college, or their college degree in geography.
I did read these article headlines.
Right. So we've really lost that. Like, and I guess it's because, here's how it works in a court of law. If you want to bring an expert in to talk about forensics or psychology or whatever, they actually have to be what's you have to qualify them as an expert, which means you need to show the court that this guy, Matt Vincent, is qualified to come in based on his level of education and practical work and whatever else he's done, that he's qualified to be able to speak on this. Well, we've come to this situation now where we no longer respect expertise. We think everybody who is alive and can say words or type something in a phone their opinion is worth listening to, and they themselves think their opinion is worth listening to on certain subjects, about which, in my view, most people shouldn't have an opinion. You can't have an opinion. And if you have an opinion on a bunch of stuff and then you then simultaneously don't trust expert opinions and don't seek those out, right? Like if you're trying to learn about the corporate education model, you and I aren't experts on that.
Right.
And in fact, you and I probably could spend a lot more time learning about why our education model was set up that way and what we could do to improve it and what the experts who are actually in that field are saying to improve it. Instead, you and I are just popping off about what we think, right? Like we really shouldn't even be talking about this because we don't know shit.
You're right. But I do think conversation still drives everything, right?
I know.
Here's
what I said. There's a balance there. I'm not saying that you and I, of course, can't have. We're both smart people, and we should be able to have conversations.
And as a generation down from you, and doing essentially a whole job through social media, and we both approach it very differently. Whereas I share a ton of my life, right?
Right. I do even more than Kelly. Kelly shares none of his life, which is interesting, right? If you look on the spectrum of us.
Well, but that's the difference in one of its. So my life isn't shared on Hate Brand.
Right.
My life is shared on my account.
Right.
As yours does too.
Right.
There's a difference in these two spaces.
Yep.
Hate Brand does not have a political statement to make. We sell fucking shirts.
Right. No, I know.
Pretending that we're anything else.
We had that same problem too. I mean, and like, man, I am 100% like donated to, sympathetic to, 100% on board with Black Lives Matter. I'm horrified by the George Floyd thing.
Yeah, because you're a human.
But we also had a lot of people saying, when are you going to make a public statement about this? And I think to myself, like, I'm willing actually to be like a moral and political leader in my personal life, and I really actually try to be. I'm really super involved in my community, and I try to, whatever. Hey, Jupes. But I'm also like, dude, same thing like Kelly and I are like, we are selling stretching videos.
Right, dude.
So at what point did just the fact, I agree with you, why is it that there's this expectation that just the fact of us being online and having a presence means that we have to provide moral leadership?
Same thing I felt.
Shouldn't.
Because I have an audience.
Right.
Does not make me an expert on the plight of black men in America.
No, or that you signed up to be a moral leader, right? That's the other thing.
It's okay for me to say I don't know.
Right. Yes.
The other thing that's a problem in our country, and back to experts, right?
Yeah.
I think we're aware, especially in the courtroom setting, we've seen enough of it that experts can be fucking bought. And if you want to prove something with statistics in our country, chances are no matter what it is, you can prove it.
But you can, but that's a cynical view because you can always say that about anything. You can always, that's the problem. To me, that's a little bit cynical because people say that about science too. Like they're like, well, I don't believe in science because, of course, some studies are paid for by the pharmaceutical business, and some studies aren't peer reviewed, and some. So I think the problem with that argument is you can always make that argument about really anything.
Just about anything. You're right.
And I think that's a bad. I actually think that's not a way to think about things because ultimately it's cynical because otherwise then you can never believe there's an expert. Yes, of course, there's going to be some experts who can be bought in certain spaces. Yes, but Paul Krugman is a freaking smart as shit economist that is an opinion writer for the New York Times. And I literally see people online arguing about, and I'm literally like, you know what, Paul Krugman, whatever, there's always going to be some argument. If you're a right winger, you can say, oh, well, he's paid and it's the deep state or whatever you want to say. There's always going to be some argument, but this is the problem. You can always make an argument like that, but that's sort of cynical, I have to say. That's a cynical way of seeing things.
I'm also pretty cynical.
Yeah, and I don't think you need to be that way. I think you can ultimately believe that most science is pretty good and that has advanced us as a species and that you really should believe in it. And when the experts are saying COVID is real, you should believe that. And when the experts are saying climate change is real, you should believe that. That's not to say there aren't shitty scientists.
Yes, you need to educate yourself enough to have a filter of bullshit.
Right.
The same thing as the video that popped up of I think she's Jamaican. She was a doctor and talking about hydrochloroquine relatively recently, but she's also talking about praying demons out of your blood.
I know, yeah.
And so, the fact that this video got shared at all,
right, is scary.
Fuck, man.
It's scary.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem is that our society has also shifted to we would rather the information first and wrong,
right. But
then
I think,
correct.
again, I think that goes back to education, though, because I think because really the core of education should be, and that's one of the reasons why I love law school. Law school really isn't, law school actually, the focus of it is teaching you how to think.
Sure.
And also hammering into you that you don't know.
That you don't know.
That you don't know, you're never going to know, and you need to be okay, that it's okay to say you don't know, and that you're not an expert.
Yeah, but you can find out.
You can always find out. But I think that's really maybe what's been lost in our education, is that this teaching of people to be critical thinkers and be able to evaluate information and be able to say, look, like on the whole, most science is pretty good and has elevated us as a species and as a country and is real, and we should listen to the experts in science. Yes, of course, there's going to be 2% of scientists who are bought and doing fucked up stuff and whatever.
Yeah, shitty people exist in every industry.
Right, but that if you have a brain, you should be able to figure out who those people are, like this woman in Louisiana who, demons out or whatever her deal was.
Was she in Louisiana?
I feel like she was. I know.
That adds up.
I'm sorry, Matt.
That adds up. Look, I don't live there anymore.
Yeah. So anyway, it's so complicated, but I still just, man, I mean, if we could,
and again,
if we could teach people how to think,
I have
and,
no
and
problem
teach
with
them to be humble.
Idea of education, and the idea of, look, I think that's another problem with our country too. Is we, for the most part, we're as Americans are not people who like saying I'm sorry, or that we're wrong,
or that we're wrong, or that we don't know.
We just don't know.
Yeah, like it's okay, we don't know that.
It's okay, we're figuring this out.
Right.
Like,
I don't have an answer to that.
I was thinking that, like,
yeah, we do suck at that. I agree.
Let's say randomly we have elected Elon Musk to be our president 4 years ago.
Right.
So here's where we are. I would have loved to have seen a press conference with someone like that who isn't playing politics, who's also kind of a robot. Because I can just imagine him being like,
he's so weird.
The COVID thing, we're working on it. Well, I'm working on it. Like him literally saying like, so I'm gonna get out of here.
Right.
Because I don't understand why I'm talking to you.
Right.
When I've got these scientists I'm working with.
Right. Who they do know.
Right. And so I'm gonna go get with them.
Right.
And try to figure some shit out.
Right.
Everyone else, be cool for a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe treat this like it's super deadly because we don't fucking know.
Right.
But you're still going to have these idiots that the Karens of the world.
Isn't that funny? It wasn't until like 6 months ago I became aware of this whole Karen
thing.
No?
See, I've known about this for quite some time.
Yeah, like I was totally, I think maybe it was from Georgia, and I was like, why do you keep saying Karen? I'm like, help me understand
Who's
this.
This Karen?
What is this Karen
Entitled
thing?
white women?
And, and now it's funny because I'm enough older than you that they're actually like, I don't actually think I know anyone personally named Karen.
Right.
But like, that was a name, right?
Well, they're not born. They just later are given the name at some point once they get the haircut.
But what if you actually were given the name Karen? This is tough. It's tough.
It's tough. You should look at maybe getting it changed.
Yeah, I was like, ooh.
Names are a weird one, right? Like this is one of those I pontificate on every now and then. It's like for as much as we are individualized as people and want to show our own style and have this freedom, whether it's tattoos or clothing or any of this, not many people change their name. They're like, oh, this is fine. Yeah. This is the name I was given. We'll just roll with that forever.
Yeah. Even if it's a shitty name.
Right.
Yeah, it is true, or it doesn't suit you or whatever.
Well,
yeah, I think names
you don't pick it.
It's funny. I took really seriously naming our kids because my and I think I've told you this before, but like I really do think a name can actually define you, and like you can sort of become. It sounds crazy, but like I don't mean to be mean, but if your name is Brittany, you're probably not going to become president of the United States.
We haven't had one yet.
So,
but I also wouldn't have guessed Obama would have been a presidential candidate.
That's true. So maybe I'm totally wrong on that, and that's horrible and judgmental, and I'm a terrible person. I just got struck by lightning. But that was kind of like
it
for me.
It doesn't lightning storm here.
Yeah, it doesn't. There's no weather here of any kind, Matt Vincent. It's
always
you guys
are very
like
comfortable here in California. That's why we get to care about these type of things.
So I agree with you. I think a name is important, and I had never thought about how nobody changes their name often enough. My dear friend Lisa, who actually works for the Ready State, she has felt her entire life like she's not Lisa. Like she was given the wrong name. And she's definitely like, I think thinks Lisa's sort of a boring standard name.
She's just like, Lisa's not me.
She's not me. She doesn't feel like Lisa's me. And so she has kind of like not officially legally renamed herself, but she goes by the name Lux, Lux.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we all call, we all call her Lux, and that's her name on Facebook is Luxie, and like she just sort of I guess that's one way to do it too without doing the whole legal thing. You can just sort of adopt a nickname if you don't feel like your name's your name. I mean, Matt.
I've been called a lot of things. Matt Vincent.
I call you Matt Vincent.
I know.
We digress.
It happens. We go both names. I'm like a Mark Bell. Both names. So let me switch gears here up out of political and our solving of the world's problem, and what I really want to focus on, especially now having Rebecca on, is I want to showcase more of the stud female athletes that I have in my world.
You have a lot of them.
And you are one of them.
Well, thanks,
I think it's
Vincent.
easy to be the lady behind the ready state, and on this side of stuff. Meanwhile, no one realizes the absolute savagery that you've had as a competitor throughout the years. Another world champion.
Well, one of the things I love about you and our friendship is that you and I are both world champions.
And Kelly's not.
Totally weird sports too, like fringe sports.
Just the weirdest.
You have to like explain.
Ever.
You have to explain to people what it is. You're like,
they'd be
world
more
champion.
Impressed if it was darts.
Yes,
because they've
heard of darts. Yeah, they've heard of darts or whatever. But I think that's always nice. We share that in common. That we're world champions.
We're in on the joke a little bit.
Yeah, we are. We're in on the joke. So yes.
But very proud about it.
Yeah.
And so you give me some athletic background. What have we done?
Well, I was just kind of a dabbler as a little kid. I played at my public middle school, I played like every single sport. So I was like soccer, softball, volleyball, whatever. Sure. And I was kind of mediocre at everything, I'll be honest. I wasn't
Same. Yeah, right on.
Yeah, I was just mediocre. Like I showed up and was reliable and whatever, but was never like good at any of those sports, like ball sports. And then I actually moved in high school and just on a whim went down to try the rowing team.
Okay.
And just fell in love with it. And I think partly because rowing is a sport for mediocre athletes, but who
so
have
at this point, this
the
is
mindset.
like crew?
Crew.
Okay.
Yep. So I started doing that in high school and just really fell in love with it. Like I actually don't, it's weird the way the brain works. I actually don't really remember much of anything about the actual part of going to high school at all. All of my high school memories are around like my rowing team, partly because that was like my social circle. And what I was so focused on it that I think like I did go to school, but I don't really remember it.
That's fair. Because if I really have to trace back to high school, even at, being 37, like I would say most of my memories are either track practice or being in the football locker room.
Right, that kind of stuff. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like
or in the weight room with those
I remember
dudes
like
dying.
my weird driver's ed simulator, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but,
I remember doing the things I enjoyed. I have checked out of what classrooms looked like.
Right, me too. Exactly, me too. My brain just like filed that away some more. So I started rowing. We actually, it was a club rowing team, but we actually won the state championship when I was a junior. Yeah, so that was kind of like my first taste at like kind of winning something big. And that's what I wrote my college essay about, which I now look back and laugh because I was like, what a boring essay, but whatever. At the time I was like, I'm writing this essay about what it was like to be state champion. Yeah. And then I went to Cal and I was a Division I rower at Cal for 2 years. And then I think also, and I'm sure a lot of athletes have this experience where, it took me
like
until
Cal Berkeley?
Cal Berkeley.
Okay.
It took me till I was 20 years old to realize like wrong body for this sport.
You're not tall.
No. And, the thing is I can suffer and I can work hard. And so I was able to get by, including even rowing, at a Division I school by just outworking everybody.
Yep.
But I reached a point when I was 20 where I was like, wow, this 6'2" girl who's like totally floppy, has no integrity, no abs. She's actually kind of fat, doesn't really train that hard. And she can just show up and just by sheer
she just has other tools in the toolbox.
She has other tools in the toolbox. So meanwhile,
I'm
like jacked and have no body fat and so fit, and I'm doing like extra. We're already doing 2 days, but I'm doing extra workouts on my own in order to like keep up and stay fit. And at some point, I was like, I literally did have a realization because I was on the freshman crew and then the JV crew as a sophomore. And as a sophomore, I was like, I finally, I don't know if it was just maturity. I was like, I'm in the wrong sport. Like this is the wrong sport for me. So I quit and I played club ultimate frisbee for the next 2 years.
Okay,
which is so fun.
Of course it's fun. I never got into that.
It's so fun. And now,
Seems like
you and I
time.
are too like old and broken to really play that. So whatever. So it hasn't continued on my life, but I can throw a frisbee really well, and I love that was great. And
frisbee
what was great about it is
thing.
it was like I didn't go from like this intense 2-a-days year-round practice. I went to but it was so refreshing because it was like 3 days a week of practice, a couple tournaments on the weekend, real cash. So I sort of kept like an athletic community, and I was still training, but not as much, and it was great.
Right.
And then I have to fast forward back in between. So after
I have
to fast forward back.
This works.
I have to rewind. In between my senior year of college and college, I worked as a hostess at a restaurant, and I was like, dude, never again. Like I will never work at a restaurant.
This is a job that only people this age are allowed to do.
Yeah, I was
for a
like,
reason.
this is the worst job ever. I hate the whole summer. I hated it, and so as a freshman, I became friends with some people, and we started investigating like what could we do for a summer job next summer, and we figured out that we could go to raft guide school. The raft guide school was over our spring break in March. And, it checked all the boxes for like my 18-year-old brain because I was like, I want to be tan. Check. Want to work outside? Check. Don't want to work inside? Check. Would like to be around some cute boys? Check. Like, it's just funny when I look back at like the way my 18-year-old brain was making decisions. Is like I was like, brilliant.
We'll just do this forever.
So a couple friends of mine and I went to guide school over our spring break freshman year.
This is like a week.
And it was a week long, and then if you make the cut, you get hired. So I got hired, and so I started after my freshman year working as a river guide, and so I did that every summer of college.
Should I be concerned about the standard of skill that river guides have?
Yeah, exactly. Just
or is it a really properly trained?
No, actually, I worked for a company that had a really good intensive training program.
It's still a week.
But you still had to go then learn each river. There was more training beyond that. So you learned the core skills in that week, but then you got more training. But yes, I mean, you should be concerned generally speaking if you go on rafting trips because the level of skill and ability is vast.
I'm sure.
Right?
Just like any profession.
Yes. Oh my Lord.
There's some doctor that made all C's.
And we can talk about this because I'm telling you math. We can talk about this, but I believe being a river guide actually was the most formative job I had, and I think actually is why I'm good at what I do now. But we can get to that later. So when I think it was during my senior year, there were some women that were running the U.S. women's extreme whitewater team, and they needed a person. They'd lost a teammate because she had a back injury, and so they were setting up to go to a national championship, which was in June, and then if we made it, there was a Worlds on the Zambezi River in Africa. In September.
How did you even find out about these people looking for someone?
They found me, so they knew. So they kind of put word out in the rafting community for we need a person, and then someone said, oh, there's this woman Juliet who used to be a rower, right? Meathead. They kind of needed a meathead. They need someone who had some basic rafting skills, which is actually how we got Rebecca in. Did she tell you this?
No.
So I have to tell. I will off. So they basically needed someone who had some basic river skills but could also pull hard.
Yeah.
And obviously with my rowing background. But they did actually host this whole tryout. We all went down to the Kern River in California. There were 25 women that showed up. And I still am thinking this is never I was I don't even really know what the sport even is and whatever, but I'm going to show up. It's fun. And then I made the spot. And all of a sudden, it was a whirlwind because that was in May. And then I'm going to a national championships in Colorado in June. And then I'm preparing to fly to Africa in September for the Worlds. If we make it.
You have not spent really any time on a river at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, by this point, I had been a river guide for 3 summers.
3 summers. Okay. So this isn't just the timeline isn't, I applied for river guide school, and then that summer I was recruited by this national champion women's team.
There was a little time, but I mean, I will say that, these races we did were all on the world's biggest rivers, biggest Class 5 rivers. They're all televised. The whole goal of it was to try to have as many rafts flip and be upside down and have as much carnage as possible. So I had not done that kind of rafting. That was extreme for me. So I did that. But so I was on the national team for 5 years. During that time, we won 5 national championships and we went to 5 worlds, won 2 worlds. Then actually in 2018, we got back together as a crew of masters athletes and we went back to Argentina. Again, we're all busy, have jobs, kids, whatever. We barely trained.
Rebecca didn't go to this.
Rebecca didn't go, although she was invited.
I understand.
She couldn't go, but
she's too busy saving the planet.
We trained a little bit, and we all kind of trained on our own, but we just sort of relied on our old skills. And we competed as masters, and we ended up winning the world championship again as masters in 2018. And it was by a hair. The Norwegians were really good this year, and we beat them by 1 point. We almost felt bad because the Norwegian Masters women seems they're serious and they train all year round.
Whoops.
And they all kind of that's pretty much what they do.
It's not my fault.
And
I'm the biggest and strongest. I don't
we
even
just show
exercise.
up and we're Hulk smash, whatever. But anyway, so that was fun. But back to Rebecca, same thing happened. I think it was I was 3 years into being on the national team, and we lost one of our teammates, and we were again seeking. And again, because this is a fringe sport, and you need a very unique, weird skill set. Somehow through the grapevine, we hear of this woman, Rebecca Rush, who is living somewhere in Southern California, and she's an outrigger canoe paddler.
Right.
Because she went through a phase of competing, right? Because she's done everything.
Yeah, because she's a maniac.
And they're you guys should, connect with this woman, Rebecca Rush. She's an outrigger canoe paddler. She's real strong and jacked. And, you guys would. And then Rebecca literally had no river experience whatsoever. So we pluck her out of outrigger canoe paddling. Obviously, as has been proven out and 10 times million over. She's an amazing athlete.
She's just fine. She'll figure it out.
Right, she'll figure it out. But I mean, it was pretty extreme for her because we literally pluck her out. We go to one race on some Class 5 river in Colorado and sketchy. Then we win. We go to I think she did the Orange River with us in South Africa, which is this full-on gnarly Class 5 river that the government of South Africa had to release water for because it's not normally like even raftable.
Oh, okay.
So like no one's even been down this river. It's totally sketchy. It's like this, whatever, crazy, and anytime you're in Africa, everything you do is crazy. And
that adds up.
So that's the story about Rebecca. We literally pluck her out of outrigger paddling obscurity, throw her in, and we're like, this is Class 5 extreme whitewater. So obviously,
we're going to Africa.
Obviously she was great, but she and I bonded because we were sitting back then. The teams had 6. There were 6 of us in the boat. When we just did this masters competition, they've kind of scaled it back, and it's now little smaller boats with 4 people. So there were only 4 of us. But when Rebecca was there, she and I were in the middle of the boat, and we really bonded because we were just like the dumb meatheads. Like
pull.
Just like don't talk to us.
Don't fall out of the boat. Pull hard.
Yeah, we're not going to follow the boat. We're just going to pull hard. We're going to move the boat. Like, we're not going to talk. We're not going to bring a lot of like human drama to the picture. Like, we're just going to be meatheads. So she and I really bonded over
just
that.
Engine.
We were just engine.
I fucking love it. And
yeah.
So I guess back to your rafting, and you were saying that we'd get back to it. Is damn it.
Just how influential that job was on.
Yeah.
So here's what was so cool about that job for me as basically a kid, right? I started it when I was 18, is you actually take on like an immense amount of responsibility, especially because I worked for this guy named Bill McGinnis, who's like a pioneer in rafting, and he got permits on all these rivers. So he had permits all over California on like 15 different rivers. So it wasn't just like you got up every day and took people down the same river every single day. Like we were packing up vehicles, buying food, putting rafts on crazy vehicles and trailers, driving to every corner of the state of California and to Oregon, and running wilderness trips, where you're taking all your food and all your stuff. And
so overnight
trips, like kind of like the Grand Canyon, but like more like 5-day trips. And we
Not
were
2
doing
weeks.
that all over. And we were all like 18 to 20-year-old kids, right? And responsible for people's lives.
Responsible for people's lives.
So, no wonder I love to plan because there are a ton of logistics involved in all that.
That adds
At
up.
every moment of every day, there's tons of logistics. The other thing is you just learn to kind of always like one of the things you learn as a guide is just see what needs to be done and do it, right? Because you're always kind of working as a guide. Like it's like the most underpaid job because you basically, wake up at 5:30 in the morning and you work till 10 at night. And it's all about just like contributing wherever you can contribute. See what needs to be done. Like that dish needs to be done. That pail needs to be moved there. This cooler needs to be moved here. It's all just about like, but you really actually learn the skill that is pretty transferable to your life. Like you just can show up anywhere and be like, well, I see things that need to be done. Do it.
I have to say, like our Grand Canyon trip, like if there's not a bigger takeaway that I took from that trip that I've used more, it was simply that the easiest thing that makes all of this better, and I said this the very first day that we hit the road for the 8 or 9 weeks that we've been on this trip, right, is like the most helpful thing you can ever do is always say, how can I help?
How can I help? Yeah,
how can I help?
Yeah, and because I think sometimes people want to help, but they don't know, right? Not everybody can sort of see what needs to be done, and you can just get right over that by showing up in literally any environment. I don't care if you're a construction zone or a law firm or where you are. Just be like, how can I help? What can I do? Because there always is something to do.
This is essentially like all the companies that I work with that aren't hate.
Yeah.
This is how I go into it. How can I help? How can I help make things better?
Right.
Do we need to meet these people? Can I introduce? Can I bring this? Can I do media? What?
Right.
How can I help?
How can I help? Right. So to me, that was such a formative skill because I've really been able to take that. And then the other thing I think from a skill standpoint, I also, by the way, advanced to being the manager. And so I think just learning how to manage people at an early age was really important in what I do now because I manage a lot of people.
Makes sense. Is good.
But I think the other sort of skill that I think is so important is that I learned how to talk to people because on every day and diverse people with different backgrounds.
Yep.
And like those people. And I think that's one of the things, again, back to our political thing that so sucks is like, I actually think we all have so much more in common than we do have different, I mean, you and I don't always see exactly eye to eye on all this stuff, but it doesn't matter because I love you and I respect you.
But we also both think the other person has formed an opinion based on a
something.
thought.
Right, exactly. So,
not just like, this what's said, I won't even consider yours.
Right, and so you just like on any given day, like one day I would come and I'd have like a family with kids and parents. And then the next day I'd come and I'd have like 5 construction guys who were like do you mind if we call you Queenie? And I'd be like, no problem. And, you know, then you have a group of firefighters and then some military guys. And then you have, you know, you've got a bunch of plumbers and like, you know, and then the lawyers and then you've got venture capitalists and like literally the
These
amount.
These are very different people to communicate with.
And you really have to learn how to relate and talk to different people and sort of meet them at their level. And I think that is like, of all the skills I learned, that may have been like the most valuable because, you know, I can talk, like, here's an example. Kelly and we always kind of laugh because when we go to weddings, we're always put at like the weird table where with someone's like
a bunch of weirdos. Kelly and Juliet can talk to them. This will be fine.
That's exactly it. Like we're with like, wow, the cousin who like doesn't talk to people. And then we're like with the two super like nice people, but they're like deep introverts. And then like, if you look around like it's happened to us so many times that we're like, seriously, this is a thing. And I think it literally is because I think people know they invite us to their wedding and they're like, okay, well, someone needs to be willing to like talk to this kind of disparate group of people. Kelly and Juliet can definitely do that. And I think it's literally because we were both river guides.
Or this look same thing for me, but it was the years of outside sales.
Yeah, right.
It was me taking dudes to lunch I don't have shit in common with,
Nothing.
and I have to talk to.
You have to talk to them.
And I need them to like me.
And you need them to like you, and you need to spend a whole hour with them. Like, you know, on a raft, I'd be with these people for like 5 or 6 hours. I really have to like, you know, bring people out and learn how to ask questions.
I definitely remember having a few lunches, right, where like, oh, man, you're just mining questions out of a guy, trying to mine conversation, just trying, right?
Yes.
And at some point, like I've gotten my 5th or 6th one-word answer of yes or no. I'm just like, fuck it, I'm going to eat. I'm just going to sit here and eat in silence with you, man. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, you're like
this is fine.
Well, it's funny. My brother has this thing, and he's more mean than me, but he has this rule where he calls it like the 7-question rule. And basically, if he asks you 7 questions and you have not yet asked him a question about him, he's like done. And he literally will just like turn around and walk away.
And leave.
I have like, you know, I think deep down I like need to please more, so I would never do that. I'd be like, oh my God. But in theory, I appreciate that idea, right?
Yeah,
like
I do.
conversations
Yeah, for sure.
are supposed to be a give and take.
They're a give and
right?
take,
Like
for
you want to
sure.
have two, right? You want to have 2 voices, and so so the 7-question rule, though, you were like at the 4-question rule, but same principle. But yeah, I think, you know, I mean, that's why, man, I just think again we have like as a culture we have way more in common than we you know, somehow I don't know how we've gotten so disconnected as a culture, but I think
we've not only become disconnected, we've become split.
Right.
That the powers that be seem to really enjoy
Right.
the more that we stay focused on disliking each other, instead of pointing the mirror back at them and being like, hold on a second.
Yeah, like we
This
probably
is what's
literally
fucked.
as a culture disagree on like 5% of things.
Yep.
Literally, it's like this like core group, and then like 95% of things, like we probably actually all have pretty similar values and want the same things in life and want the same things for our children.
Everyone raise your hand if you think you should be treated the way you treat people.
Right. I mean, exactly.
Everyone in on that? Can we let's just start finding this agreement ground that no matter right or left or whatever it is, that let's start with these principles.
Yeah.
And then let's move out. And also, we're allowed to disagree.
Right. It's okay.
It's ideal.
It's actually
We're not
ideal.
supposed to
it's better.
be on board.
Right. Like we actually culturally, like we do better as a human species if we disagree a little bit. And that's what, so anyway, so those, I think, you know, those skills have been so transferable to my life in so many ways that, you know, and it wasn't really until like I turned 40 or something that I started sort of spending a little time like thinking back, like, you know, because some people have asked me too, like, why are you so successful at this? Or why are you so good at that? Or why are you so good at this? Or whatever. And honestly, I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I never thought about it. Like,
same.
Literally, I'm like, I don't know. Like,
a lot of it is
born
just,
that way. I don't know.
A lot of it is I just didn't quit.
Right. You can
It's
work
a war.
hard.
It's a war of attrition.
Right.
It's like I've just
Right.
been in this long enough now that it seems to be working out.
Part of it too is like no fear of working hard. Like it's funny because you know we've both chosen sort of like lifestyle jobs.
But it's also a no fear of failing.
Right.
I don't mind failure.
No.
Failure
And you
teaches
can learn
you
from
shit.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, you know, man, just the working hard thing, like it's funny because we're in these lifestyle jobs and yet in many ways I work way more than I did when I was a lawyer.
100%.
But because it's your own thing and because your time is your own and you can choose when you want to work and how you want to work and whatever, then it doesn't feel oppressive, right? In a way that like a normal job can feel oppressive. But same thing with the river guiding thing, man. I mean, we would literally be up at 5:30 doing hard manual labor, talking to people, logistics, driving, guiding,
Getting
cooking.
boats prepared for the day.
Boats prepared. I mean, like tying knots, you name it, doing all this stuff, and then literally fall asleep dead in our tents at like 10 o'clock at night in the middle of nowhere, crushed, and then get up again and do it the next day, like over and over and over again. So I think that's probably also too where I learned, like, you know, like sometimes I have difficulty, and this is a flaw I have as a manager of people. I have difficulty with people who have a super 9-to-5 mentality, because I just think, man, that's not how our world works anymore, and that's not how work gets done. And sometimes you might need to work 6 to 10. That shouldn't be every day, and that's not sustainable. But there may be times when you just need to crush.
If you like a 9-to-5, there's jobs that are 9-to-5s.
Right.
But you don't also get the same freedoms I get.
Right. And you don't ever get to make, because that's the other problem I have, is there's people who literally want to come in at like 9:01 and leave at 4:59.
Yep.
And then also simultaneously expect to make the big bucks. And I'm like, no. To me, a 9-to-5 job these days is a lifestyle job. Like you basically have decided that you don't ever want to have to check your email after 5 o'clock, and you don't ever want to be available, and you don't want to be working past certain times. And to me, that's a lifestyle job, and that's great. I respect that. I have tons of friends who want a lifestyle job, but then you're also not going to make like $250,000 a year at that
Which
job.
is fine.
That's fine too.
Look, I mean, if
there's no
if
flaw.
you have decided, for me, and one of those things I explain to people, like my ultimate goal is not making the most amount of money I can.
No.
I'm interested to make the most amount of money I can
to do the things you want,
living the way I'd like to live.
Right.
And the
Same
truth
with
is there's a ton of really rad shit I want to do.
Same, me too. And some of it does cost money, so I'm
most
with you
of
on
it's
that.
expensive.
Yeah, like a mid-century modern container ship home is not cheap. But yeah, I agree with you. It's funny, when we started like having some success living here in Terra Linda, some people said to us, "Well, like, are you guys going to move now and like get a bigger house and upgrade?" I was like, "What are you talking about?"
We have enough
like,
room.
No part of me, like, I couldn't even relate to the question, because I was like, no.
Why would you leverage yourself, continue to leverage yourself more on the income coming in? Like, there's a point where, like, it's, Bonnie and I mean, our house, like, we just finished, it's not big. We're 1,600 square feet. It's about similar to you guys, and
it works
I don't
great.
want more house than this.
No.
The's 2 of us that live in it.
Right, and then
I already
you have to
have
clean
a room
it,
no one goes in.
Right, there's already one that nobody comes to, and yeah, so I think it. I agree with you. I mean, I definitely, Kelly and I want to have enough money to like feel secure, and there's certain things like we really would like to actually be able to pay for our kids to go to college, so they have no debt, and there's some sort of financial goals we have, but like they're pretty minimal, and one of them definitely is not like upgrading to a mansion. I could give 2 shits about that.
Or the flashy car, or any of the other stuff that social media seems to kind of
add
around. So with your rafting life,
yep.
What's the closest you ever thought you were in real trouble?
I took actually in world championship events, we were always flipping and training and whatnot, but there were a couple of swims I took in big, huge Class 5 rapids where I definitely was like, this could be it.
I'm underwater for way too long.
I'm underwater for too long. I'm already, and the other thing too is when you flip in a situation like that,
you're gassed.
You're gassed. So it's not like you have a bunch of, you blow a lot earlier, right?
Yeah,
You don't go in, and so
10 seconds is a long time.
So I definitely had a couple swims like that where I was underwater, and I was definitely like, shit, okay, like this is. So I had a few situations like that. Then of course the hippo attack.
What? Hold on.
I'm like, then the hippo attack.
A hippo attack. This is an experience I don't have on my things that have happened to me.
So here's what's funny about the hippo attack is, you haven't, it's been a long time since you've had a corporate job, and me too.
Yeah.
But we used to go, like when I was at the law firm, we'd do these corporate events and retreats and whatever, and there would always be like some kind of team
building thing. I get it.
And one of the team building things is always like 2 truths and a lie, or like tell a fact about yourself that's like the most absurd that no one would ever believe. Right. And I'm always like, I'm going to win this game. Like I already won. Like I'm in a room of 500 people. I just won.
No one here's had a hippo attack.
Yeah, because I was like, I just won. Like won the team building game. So it was actually after the first World Championships I did on the Zambezi River. We when you fly all the way to Africa, you're like, well, I may as well stay. So we were there for like 6 weeks. We got there 2 weeks early to train and then do the event, and then stayed to do safaris and stuff. And my mom actually came out to watch the event. And it was very extreme for her, by the way, because in order to watch the event, she also had to raft most of the Zambezi River, which is full on in Class 5. So, props to Janet for that one. And
you're both your parents.
Yeah, I was like, props.
Your dad kicked the shit out of me on the Grand Canyon
I know,
hiking, and
I
I can't do anything.
Yeah,
I'm like,
Warren. I know, you're like, oh, Warren.
Warren's a star.
Warren. But anyway,
be like him when I grow up.
I know, we all want to be like him. Well, I have a funny story about him and COVID, but I'll tell you that afterwards. Anyway, so we decided to go on a canoe safari on the lower Zambezi River. We had to take maybe one of the sketchiest flights I've ever taken, clearly like a reject commercial airline from the United States bought by the country of Zimbabwe. And you're like, dude, this actually may be how I go down.
They just spray painted on the side of the plane?
Yes, I was like, reject plane, definitely sketchy, like sound. You heard a lot of sounds. So we fly over there. We go on this canoe safari, and, there's some red flags. The first is we are doing like our safety talk with the guy in canoes, one guide, and he's like, okay, so here's my gun, and here's my other gun, and then here's my sex gun, and then I've got like 12 guns in my canoe. And we're all like, oh, shit, what are the guns for? And he's like, well, hippos, they're really aggressive. And, I don't know if you know this, but they kill more.
Yeah.
The number one.
Than anything.
Than any other animal, they kill more humans.
Yeah,
and
I think other than
let
mosquitoes.
Me just say, like, lesson learned as a young person. When you go to a place and the local people don't do a thing. Don't do the thing. Like, just don't be that idiotic white tourist who goes and does the thing because
we're invincible.
And like, let me just tell you, the locals don't even go within like 8 feet of the river because someone in their family's been dragged in by a 30-foot crocodile or eaten by a hippo or whatever, let alone canoe down the river. In this particular area. So whatever, but here we go,
Why do they even sell this trip? Well, because people want to go.
Right. So we have this whole safety talk about how like the number one sketchy, because it's all just, sometimes the river is a mile wide. It's just current. There's no rapids of any kind. You're just, going
pretty chill.
And sometimes it channelizes very chill. But he's like, the whole entire safety talk was like, hippos. These are all my weapons to kill hippos. And I was like, oh, sweet Jesus. So, so on the third day, the river has become super channelized.
Have you been seeing hippos the whole?
Everywhere. In fact, for a lot of the day, no one's speaking because we're all like gripped. This is after doing the Class 5 World Championship.
Jesus.
We're gripped because you'd be paddling along and then there'd be a wake. And you could tell the wake was created by like a 30-foot crocodile you just went over, swimming away from you, not attacking you, but still you're just... So basically the whole day there's so many hippos and like crocodiles that can like literally eat you in one bite that like you're kind of gripped the whole day. So like during the day when we're not at camp, we're like, no one's really even talking. We're all so nervous. So we get to this point and he's like, would you guys want to go to Hippo City or Hippo Bronx? There's two kind of things. And all my teammates, idiots, they're like, Hippo Bronx, ha 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 ha, Hippo Bronx. So we go down this channel with like hundreds of hippos you can see everywhere. And no one's speaking because we're all terrified. And then the next feeling I have is being thrown probably 15 feet in the air.
So do the river?
Into the river.
So like from a rapid or?
No, from a hippo. Coming at full speed underneath.
Hippopotamus hit your boat.
4,000-pound hippopotamus hit, and it hit right. So it hit right underneath me. So my last thing was, what I saw to my right was just looking down the throat of the jaw. The jaw. It's this big. The mouth is this big.
The mouth and everything hit the boat. This wasn't like an errant.
Well, it came up, and fortunately, I didn't get chomped in my spot because it came up with those two giant knife tusks. Yeah. And it had so much speed and momentum from underneath that I was actually already flying out of the boat into the water by the time it chomped.
It chomped the boat.
Yeah. And anyway,
what the shit, man?
What they tell you in the safety talk is, hippos, they don't really want to eat you. They're just pissed and super territorial. They're actually vegetarians. They're just very territorial.
Is that supposed to make it better that they don't want to eat you?
No. So what they say, though, is they're like, here's what you do if you get attacked, is you want to swim away from your canoe because hopefully the hippo will just keep attacking the canoe. And you swim away. But still, nevertheless, you're now in the water.
With giant hippos.
There's giant hippos and 30-foot crocodiles everywhere around you. And so we swim.
As if the rapids aren't enough of a problem for what you're doing with this.
Yeah, we basically swim like a 50 to the island, which was far, but the greatest swimming I've ever done. But so sketchy. I mean, that was maybe the sketchiest moment of my life in terms of like life-death experience.
I'd like to catch the time on that swim. I bet.
Because it's like the next, I wasn't sure if because it was entirely possible the next feeling you feel is getting bit by a croc or a hippo and pulled under. So, swimming toward shore. But you don't know as you're swimming. I mean, that was the sketchiest moment of my whole life because I don't know while I'm swimming whether my next feeling is going to be grabbed by a crocodile.
This isn't clear water.
No, not clear water. Don't know.
So this is like milk chocolate water. And also, I imagine it like the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, milk chocolate water. Also, not knowing whether the hippo is going to keep attacking the boat or come after us, or whether one of the other hippos is in there is going to be pissed because now we're in the water with them, or whether the crocodiles were just going to have bad luck.
They'll eat you.
Right. So there's a lot. So we did, of course, obviously make it to shore, and
when we got on shore, we found rhinos and
lions.
We
got on shore and there were a bunch of Cape buffalo who don't mock charge. So I literally actually was standing on shore saying, "Fuck this fucking place!" And like if there were cell phones this was 1997. If there were cell phones back then, I would have been like, helicopter at any price, come get me.
Help.
But there weren't. No cell phones, no nothing. Obviously, no satellite.
Dude,
nothing.
How big does the world get in those instances?
Yeah,
you realize how far you are from help?
I was so far from anything on Earth. And so so our guide actually managed to chase the canoe down. I actually only had one cut on my foot because fortunately there had been enough momentum that by the time the cut. But think about
so you got a cut on your foot from a hippo tusk.
Hippo tusk. Think about
the fuck?
Think about like those old school fiberglass canoes that are like 500 pounds. It was those kind of canoes, and the force of momentum
just blasted it.
So blasted the bottom where I sat, and so our guide eventually gets the canoe, gets it to shore, and then patches it with a bunch of Tupperware lids and duct tape.
Come on.
And then he's like, we got to keep going. Because, I mean, what else can you do?
Yeah, well, you're not going to hang out there.
So we still had like 2 days more on. It was like a 5-day canoe safari.
See, here's the benefit of how I would look at that.
Yeah.
No one's getting attacked twice.
Well, but you literally, like, for the next 2 days when we were on the river, like, no one spoke.
Everyone's just stressed
everybody
the fuck out.
was so stressed. Like, nobody spoke a word. Like, everybody was so terrified.
We finished, and I couldn't remember why I felt this way. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, it's fear.
Yeah.
I've been scared for 5 fucking days.
5 days. Just, like, terrified for 5 days. So I mean, I know that was a really long answer to your, like, what has been. But for me, that was by far the most closest, like, life and death situation I've ever been in. I'm not going to make it.
Or that I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I know I'm currently alive.
I'm always joking around because there's all these crazy people in our neighborhood who are always posting on Nextdoor. Do you know Nextdoor?
I'm familiar.
And they're always like terrified of coyotes because there are coyotes around here. And I'm like, here's the deal. Look, if you get like a little dachshund and you live here, like your dachshund may get eaten by a coyote.
That's part of the deal.
But my joke is always hero's death. Kelly and I call it a hero's death.
A hero's death getting killed by a coyote.
And I'm always like, dude, if Jupiter gets killed by a coyote, hero's death. So, so you know, obviously, you know, getting eaten by a hippo on the Zambezi River in Africa would also have been a hero's death. But I'm still glad I made it.
I'm super stoked you didn't get eaten by a hippo. It would change this relationship drastically.
Yes. Oh my God.
You being dead a long time ago.
Yeah, me being dead
changes this.
There would have been me being dead in 1997 would have changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's
hippo story.
Super wild.
Yeah.
Man, we need to do this every time I come because there's so much of you I really want to unpack and share with people. I mean, everything from battles with cancer to, I mean, everything from the building the business to you guys have amazing kids.
They're good
kids.
And
it's been really fun to watch and see grow up, you know, that like.
Yeah, we were just reminiscing about that last night.
Yeah,
we've
got to share some cool experiences, and I look forward to getting to do more rad stuff with you guys.
I know. What's your I got a question for you before we what's you and Kelly's next man adventure?
You know, we're talking about he's pretty hot on the idea of bike packing.
Yeah, currently. He is. I'm glad that he's because it's funny. He and I love to adventure together. As you know,
don't want to bike pack.
I'm game for like pretty much everything, mostly, but for some reason, bike packing sounds terrible to me.
See, here's how I look at it.
Yeah,
it's faster hiking.
Right, it is faster hiking.
That's all it is. And if I want to do like a route that's
right.
going to be this overnight hike,
right.
and it's smooth enough that I could ride a bike on.
Why not?
No, I just cover more ground. This is great.
Yeah.
I get to see more scenery and it hurts less.
Here's what I have. I have this vision of myself with like a 60-pound bike packed with all my stuff and then like having to push that bike up a steep-ass hill.
Yeah.
And that's where I go
where you
south.
punch out.
I'm kind of like, yeah, I'd rather just hike up that hill.
You're like, I hate this.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I'm glad that he's cornered you on bike packing.
Yeah, I want to do more adventure-y shit.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I definitely am leaning toward more of that. You know, a lot of that for me is a kind of an idea of just how I view time and that I don't believe I have a ton left.
Right. Yeah.
Realistically.
Yeah.
As far as Earth's concerned, I have a pretty blink of an eye left.
That's
true.
So
there's a bunch of rad shit I want to do. And I want to do as much of it with cool people as I possibly can, especially like physical stuff, because there's also something you gain from like the rafting trips or the Grand Canyon or the mountain bike trip that we did last year. Like, it just resets a lot of priorities.
Yeah.
I can very easily be home for a couple weeks and then start to be like, I don't know how I feel about my mattress. Meanwhile, if I'm tired enough from cycling trip, I'll sleep on the ground like a baby.
Right, you're fine. Exactly. Right.
Or how good is this glass of water? Or how good is, us being on the road like we've been, long days and then finally making it to camp and getting set up and then essentially being like, ground meat and rice is the most delicious thing anyone's ever put together.
So good.
It just changes priorities to this much simpler thing.
Yeah.
And
well, also, like, speaking of Warren and what you were just talking about, how we're not here forever, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you and I like to do, you can't do it your whole life.
Nope.
We obviously have had our fair share of injuries and otherwise. So I do, I have the same sense as you.
So you've double hip.
Double hip.
So you have two
it's
fake
the greatest thing I've ever done. I'm like a hip replacement evangelist.
I'm that way with the knee. Like anyone who reaches out.
Yeah.
For one, I get a question that's like, how did you know you were ready to have it done? And my response is, then you're not yet.
Right. I agree.
I had to.
Yeah, you had to. And I also think, what I tell people about the hip, and I get it. I understand the reasons why orthopedic surgeons tell people to wait as long as possible. But I tell people, man, the moment you are starting to be in like chronic pain, because nobody really knows and nobody's been able to really quantify like what the long-term impacts on your body and brain and mind are on being in chronic pain.
Yo.
But, you and I both have experienced that's bad. And, I think
you get real dark.
Yep.
Because you can't, I've been very fortunate enough that I've never dealt with any real bouts of depression.
Yeah.
Me either. But I just have to lump chronic pain into the same category as, like, you still have good moments, and I had fun with my friends, and I got to go do a thing, like at the Grand Canyon. Right. I was in real shit pain
the entire time.
The entire time.
You were dying.
But this was still a great trip.
Of course.
Right? There's moments. The problem is when things get quiet and you're by yourself again, and it's still there.
Yep.
And it never goes away. It's this constant tapping on your shoulder, asking you for attention.
Yep.
That doesn't care when you try to give it attention.
Right. Yep. I couldn't agree more with that total description.
And that's what depression has to be, is you still have these fun times. It's not that you can't smile. It's not that you...
No. But it's always lingering there. It's always just like it's a backstory all the time.
Hey,
yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey. You're not good enough. Hey.
Right.
I hurt. Hey. What are we doing? Hey.
Yep.
And it just wears you out. And for me, I was lucky enough that like I'd found a couple things that gave me relief. One being cannabis, and then two being like ice and heat.
Yeah.
For at least the couple minutes I was in a cold tub, my knee didn't hurt.
Yep.
I don't know if there was just enough sensory overload that
right,
I can't hear it.
But you're like, I'll take it, whatever
I'm
works.
Like, I get a 5-minute break. Cool.
Yeah, you're like,
I'll take 5
take
minutes.
Yeah.
And I would end up spending a ton of time in my hot tub because it didn't hurt while I was in it.
Right.
As soon as I'm out,
hurts.
I'm back in the ball game.
Yep. Yeah, so man, I mean, I same thing. Like I just really lived with too much. I mean, I think I waited too long. I mean, that's why I'm an evangelist. I think I should have done my first one 2 years earlier than I did, and I think I really suffered way too much to gain really nothing. I mean, it was already a given that it was a given for both of us that we were getting a joint replacement too young, right? Like that's
right.
okay, done. Like once you get over the reality of like, okay, I'm not, I'm only in my 40s, I shouldn't be getting joint replacements. You in your 30s. Once you get over that, then really do it because.
Well, there's so many people that hit you with this shit, and Kelly's talking about it too because I know he's up for his knee.
Yeah.
And it's this like, well, you won't be able to do this, this, and this. I'm like, I can't fucking do those things now.
Right.
They all hurt.
Yeah. Right. And you're out of pain. I mean,
right.
To me, it's like, right. And it, actually for me, the big sort of the moment where, because I felt like I was long beyond where I should have done it. And I actually met the surgeon. He was the first one to say, because I was like, well, I mean, I've been waiting to do it because he saw my hip and he's like, yep, you need to get it replaced like yesterday. I mean, he just was like very matter of fact about it. And I said, well, I haven't been doing it because I really want to keep skiing. And well, I haven't done it because I want to keep mountain biking. Well, and then he just looked at me very calmly and he goes, well, you'd still be able to do all that stuff.
Just without pain.
And it was so, like, I don't think he can even realize, like, how, like, what a moment that was in my life, because that was why I was like, I'm going to keep dealing with this chronic pain because I want to still be able to do the things I love.
Because you convince yourself that everything you've ever heard about this is it's game over.
Game over. And then you're just
for people like us.
Yeah. And then he says, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, he said, you should probably wait like 12 weeks after your surgery to ski, but then
12 weeks.
And then I was like, oh, what? And and I was like, well, I'll never be able to run again. He's like, well, you probably aren't going to want to run marathons, but you can still run. And he just started kind of chipping off the list, and man, that was like revelatory for me. I mean, I basically was like, sign me up.
Same boat.
Yep.
That was the same boat. The last conversation I had with my surgeon, because mine was like, look, I just think we should look at another option before total knee on you. And I explained that with the chronic pain, like I just blatantly said, like, man, I'm at a point that I'm not good anymore. And if this isn't the thing that's going to get me relief, I'm going to figure out how to get rid of the leg.
Right. You're like, I could just not
I'll
have
figure it out.
Right. Yeah.
Because then it doesn't hurt.
Right.
It's gone. I mean, that was friends of mine who, amputate. And I know a handful of friends I have that are above the knee amputation. And they would talk to me like, man, what you've done, it's wild. And these are guys that at some point during their injury or IED explosion or something like that had to make a decision on themselves to get rid of it or not. Because the leg's trying to come back.
It's trying, right.
I mean, a buddy of mine who was on the podcast, this guy, Paul DeGelder, Australian Special Forces dude, got attacked by a 300-kilo bull shark during an exercise. And so ended up losing his hand and losing his leg at the knee.
Holy shit.
Tough as shit. So now works with Discovery Channel during Shark Week.
Oh.
And is a huge conservationist for sharks.
I got to watch some Shark Week. I'm
He's
off my game.
He's a stud.
Let's watch some tonight.
He's a
Shark
stud,
Week.
man. And
can you explain to me, I'm sorry to go on a diversion because we're talking about chronic pain and serious stuff, but like why is Mike Tyson the spokesperson of Shark Week?
Because he's Mike Tyson.
Okay, I mean, like, is there some connection?
Well, he's
I don't
Mike
know.
Tyson, and he's also promoting that he's got, I think he's boxing again. Like
Okay.
He's kind of getting back in shape.
Okay, because I haven't actually watched Shark Week, but I'm like, what the hell? Why has Mike Tyson become the face of Shark Week? Like, it's like it's a disconnect for me. But yeah, you're right. I mean, whatever. I think the answer is
promo
correct.
for something else.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
good
yeah.
cross promotion.
I think all you need to say is
thing.
he's Mike Tyson. Done.
Yeah. I mean, what an animal.
Yeah. So I think it's good. We're the evangelists of joint replacements.
I just look. I don't know how much time I have before the end date is, and whenever that time's coming, it's coming.
Yep.
Can't nothing I can do about it. But if I can make a decision today to be in less pain for whatever time I have left, cool. I'm done with that feeling of the martyrdom that comes from like surviving it and suffering through the scars of what we've done to this machine.
Yeah.
And now with that said, like neither one of us are trying to go back and do the things that fucked us up.
No.
We had that fire.
Yeah, we can learn.
It's
I
done.
can learn.
We can move forward.
Yeah,
again.
but I think, you make an interesting point, and, this is probably for a future podcast, but my whole cancer thing. But, one thing, and again, I don't want to sound judgmental because everybody needs to deal with it in their own way. But like one thing for me is, having cancer actually was like I don't consider it a part of my identity the way many people do. There's many people who get cancer and like being a cancer survivor becomes their 100% identity.
Well,
and
you've also done a lot of things that you don't consider being a rafter part of your identity.
No, right.
It's a thing you did.
Right. It's a thing I did. And right, exactly. Like to me, having cancer was the thing that happened to me. In fact, it was like one of the worst things that happened to me. So I don't know why I would want to focus my identity on it for me. But again, to each their own. Like I think a lot of people like, being a cancer survivor and celebrating that is also very important to them. So I do not want to sound judgy of those people. I'm just saying for me, the way that I, it's not something of course it's part of who I am and something I'm happy to talk about.
Yeah, but for both of us, getting out of chronic pain was a much bigger shift in our lives than the other thing.
Right.
Than me winning, doing that. And so, I'm much more of a proponent now of rehab and getting out of chronic pain than I will be promoting
of like throwing heavy things. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's a better life afterwards, man. And even like for me, it was just that I'm young and like I'm aware that I'll have to get it done again.
Yeah, me too.
That's part of the deal.
Yeah.
But with the knee replacement, like I don't know what hip is for the second time, but for the knee, the second time. So the way it works is they cut off the bottom of the femur, they cut off the top of the tibia, cut off the back of the patella.
So amazing, isn't it?
Metal in everywhere, and then they put in this plastic meniscus.
Yep.
Right? And they're like, okay, so when things go bad, the plastic meniscus fails. The metal doesn't move, because my questions were like, so how do you remove that metal and then put in another one? And they're like, oh, we don't.
Right. It's the exact same thing with the hip.
And I was like,
the exact same thing with the hip.
So you're just popping a cartridge in?
Yeah,
this isn't even a surgery.
It's like a 20-minute thing. Yeah, so same thing with the hip. Like they chop off the top of your femur. They put in this in your pelvis. They sort of put this metal bowl, and then the femur, and then the actual joint, the ball and socket, same thing. It's got a plastic. And
it wears down.
And at some point it wears out. But what's crazy is I go in every year and I get my x-ray. And, on my one hip, I think I'm like 5 or 6 years in. And, I mean, man, I do a lot of stuff.
Right. Yeah, we're not inactive people.
No. And, I mean, my first hip replacement, the plastic still looks good. So, it's possible that this could be 25. I mean, I might be in my 70s before I have that other thing.
Perfect.
Fine. But yeah, it's crazy because that was the other thing is everyone's like, well, I mean, you have to get it. That was the other way people tried to deter me from doing it is saying, oh, well, you have to do it again. And then the same thing, I talked to my surgeon, who's the greatest guy, my hero. And he was like, no, well, I mean, it's like a 20-minute surgery. And we just take in and it's like by that point too, it's all going to, like, it's going to be done by like
and
a
we'll
robot.
be way better by then.
We'll be way better by then. So they're just going to go in whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The other thing
and
that
who
really
knows what we figure out with stem cells or anything else by that point.
Right.
And like, why would, man, that idea of just holding on and continuing to suffer because technology is going to get better, like, get out of pain, man.
Yeah, get out of pain. I think I realize there's some types of chronic pain where there's no surgical relief for it, and you and I are lucky that we're in a category that does
lucky.
like I know people with back pain, it can be like literally life debilitating and a nonstop problem. So I really feel for those people because, spinal surgery like might work, but it might not. In our case, it basically works. It's really scary. But I will say that, and I know people are researching it, but I just man, the downstream overall health effect of chronic pain, you and I, man, like we paid,
Like I have no problem admitting that chronic pain and what I went through and the changes it made in
shortened
me,
our life. It shortened our life.
Shortened our life,
yep.
but I mean that was absolutely a contributor to my marriage ending.
Yeah, right.
Because I got weird.
Yeah.
And I got shitty.
Yeah.
And I was in a bad place for a long time.
For a long time. So much pain. Yeah. I
mean, I think with people in pain, right? Like even your family dog, like at the end, if they're in pain, they'll snap.
Yeah,
they snap at you.
No, yeah, you just can't. Same thing. I feel like there were a couple years where it was, I was just in my head a lot. I mean, that's the other thing is even if I wasn't necessarily like mean to anyone at all, but I just often would need to be in my head because that's how you deal. That's how you deal. And then by being in your head, then you're closed off to those who love you, and that becomes a challenge.
Yeah, because it's also really hard to translate. And especially for us, as active as we are and as we're not complainers.
No.
And so it's tough when you're like, I know today I have this many steps I get to take before I'm done. And I'm not cool anymore.
No.
And having that limit on your day, like you know it, and it's coming. You just don't know how many steps today it is. But like I would start looking at stuff like, well, I'm not going to the store. I'm not fucking walking around a grocery store and wasting my steps today on that.
Right. When you're making those kinds of decisions.
Well, and I don't have enough steps to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
For my total
So
day.
you know what I want to say though, and I know it was a great trip and many amazing things happened, but I do feel like we need to do a redux on the Grand Canyon now that you have a new knee. Well, after Kelly has his new knee too.
I'll go back.
But I think I feel like the universe owes you
a good trip,
an opportunity to go down that trip and be able to do those hikes and those things without being in pain.
I honestly, I don't look back at that trip and feel that I was shortchanged.
No, I know, but you were. I mean, here's what I'd say. I've known you for a long time, and your knee's always been bugging you. But I mean, it was super obvious that you were dealing with a level of chronic pain that was like no one else on the trip would have been able. Like everyone else would have been helicoptered out and been put on freaking morphine. So.
Yeah, at least I've learned to deal with that well. I tell you what, though, like I do think that it messed up my my overall pain tolerance, like my ability to deal with it. I don't think like I've developed a skill like of dealing with pain better. I think I'm less tolerant.
Yeah,
it's worse. It's
well, that's why I did my second hip so quickly. So, I did my first one, and it's super common because, my second hip basically didn't hurt at all, but I realized it did hurt. It just hurt less than the other one, so I wasn't focused on it. And then when I did this hip, zero pain, as you know, the moment you wake up from surgery, it's miraculous. And then I've had my second hip was pretty much immediately starting to hurt. I was like, nope. I was like, I don't have...
Fix it.
I went in I think it was less than a year between the two.
I'm not reliving this.
No, because I was like, nope, not doing this. Like there were just a couple moments where like for some reason with my second hip, like sitting in the car was super painful, and I was like, oh hell no. So I just went straight in, and I think you're right on some level because of going through that experience. Like
and especially
my pain
that
tolerance
we found
is less.
the other side of it. You're like, I don't have to feel like this.
Right. Yeah.
This is a choice.
Yep.
And that's kind of how heavy lifting's been because I'm just still a little jacked up, and so like cool. We're going to shift focus. I mean, I told Kelly and I explained that one of the big perspective shifts I had with even rehab and coming back from it was something that happened whenever we were in Costa Rica with the ayahuasca. I ended up having this conversation one night with my knee and hip. And it was this conversation they started and were essentially like, hey, man, like everything going well for you is because of work we've done. Like we've died on our shield for this cause in your life. So how about a little respect and be nice to us for a while? Now that you're out of this,
right?
Can you
give a little break?
Maybe we can stop lifting as heavy for a little bit. Like maybe just be nice to us. Can we just do some things that feel good and like maybe get in better shape in other ways? Like you're smarter. Like you're smart enough and you have enough tools at your disposal that you don't need to reach for the hammer anymore.
Don't eat as many snacks and lift lighter weights.
Yeah, and quit treating it like the only thing you know how to do is hit us with a hammer. Right. Like you have other skills.
Right.
Develop them. And that was a big shift for me. And I think even that with rewiring how you acknowledge pain. And I'm still stiff and beat up and move around slow, but it ain't the same.
No.
It's not that it's stiffness pain or sore pain or any of that. It's not what we were. It's not that stabbing, debilitating. Mine
Constant.
would get inflamed enough that that day that we were on the Grand Canyon and we went on that long hike and then I ended up dragging through it. I'd realized about 50 feet into this 5-mile hike that I'd made a poor decision that day. Should have stayed on the boat. I'm just not smart enough to have stayed on the boat.
Yep.
I'm too much of an idiot that's like, we're doing a thing. Okay, I'll just figure it out.
Yeah, I got to do it.
And then, by the time, I'm so trashed from that when it got really bad, I would get like an 8 or 9 out of 10 stabbing pain every time I exhale. And you can't dodge that. So now I'm just
yeah,
chest breathing constantly with this tension. Because,
shallow breathing.
And that's super good for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, dude.
Love you, Matt Vincent.
I love you. I'm so stoked
fun
to
to
always
hang
get
out
to
with
hang
you.
out. Always. It's been great. And we're going to do more cool shit.
We're going to do way more cool shit. So many adventures.
I went on a boat trip without you.
I know. So weird.
Do boat things.
So weird.
I like doing fun stuff. I don't know that I need to go to Africa and get chased by hippos.
No, but you should go to Africa once in your life. It's amazing.
I do want to go.
Yeah.
I really do want to go.
I highly recommend it.
We'll have to talk more about that.
Yeah, we'll do adventure. We'll stop recording and we'll spend the rest of our afternoon adventure planning.
Adventure planning? Oh, man. All right.
It's my favorite.
Thank you guys for listening.
Love you, Matt Vincent.
Juliet, where can people find all you guys' awesome stuff?
We are at The Ready State on all the socials. I am at Juliet Starrett. Like we talked about, that's, just more about my life and my kids and what I'm up to.
Yeah. Like an actual Instagram for the sake of Instagram?
Exactly. And thereadystate.com is our website.
Love it. You guys have always been a huge help to me.
Love you, Matt Vincent. Huge fan.
Love you guys, too. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.